Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Meta, has announced a policy shift in the United States, openly stating he wants to scale back the role of fact-checkers and adopt a more permissive moderation guidelines, similar to what Elon Musk has done on X. It's a revolution that, for now, doesn't seem to affect the European Union. What does that mean for us, and what does that mean for the future of social media in Europe? Discover it with me here on Diritto al Digitale. I'm Giulio Coraggio, a data and technology lawyer at the law firm DLA Piper. This is the podcast Diritto al Digitale, where we explore my passion for creating the law, applying legal principles to technologies that lawmakers often couldn't have even imagined. In a recent video, Mark Zuckerberg announced a real change of course for Meta in the United States. He stated that fact-checkers had been too politically biased, causing more mistrust than credibility. He criticized excessive content moderation, arguing that anything that can be freely said on television or in the US Congress should also be allowed on social platforms. He introduced the so-called community notes, a new system intended to replace traditional fact-checking with a less invasive approach, one that relies on user-shared information. These statements closely mirror the policies introduced by Elon Musk on X, formerly Twitter, with lighter moderation and an emphasis on freedom of expression. Notably, community notes resembles the birdwatch concept Musk championed, which crowdsources context or clarifications from users themselves. Supporters believe that this approach empowers the community to self-regulate. However, this approach also raises questions on sensitive topics such as immigration, gender identity, and sexuality, which might inhabit a gray area between freedom of opinion and hate speech. The fact-checker role historically fulfilled by third-party organizations, often certified by the so-called International Fact-Checking Network, may be sidelined, prompting debates about whether user-driven moderation alone can be effectively tackling misinformation. While Meta's new direction starts in the United States, the situation in the European Union is different due to the so-called Digital Services Act. This EU regulation provides three strong elements. First of all, platforms like Meta must clearly explain why a piece of content is taken down or an account is limited. This means that the decision of Meta of scaling back the role of fact-checkers would require them proving that community notes is equally effective in combating disinformation. Besides, under Article 34 of the DSA, any significant changes to moderation systems require an assessment of the impact on risks such as disinformation and hate speech. Also, you should consider that Meta adheres to the EU Code of Practice on Disinformation, and therefore it must offer compliance guarantees in relation to this code. Lastly, it should be considered that many types of content that could be considered free speech in the United States are strictly regulated in the European Union. The European Commission, therefore, is going to closely watch Zuckerberg's changes to prevent an increase in hateful or illegal content. Finally, moreover, because Meta is classified as a very large online platform under the DSA, it faces heightened obligations, including providing transparent reports on how content is moderated and how algorithms are managed. If Meta's approach is perceived to weaken these safeguards, it risks significant regulatory scrutiny or even very harsh fines. Meta's move takes place in a broader context that some tie to the so-called stakeholder capitalism, a concept promoted by the World Economic Forum. In this perspective, the primary stakeholders for social networks are their users who want more freedom and fewer restrictions. The fact-checker role, not being a direct stakeholder, risks being sidelined. Traditional media outlets may face greater pressure if social media gains the same level of freedom of expression as a talk show, except with a potentially limitless, always connected audience. Under the older shareholders capitalism model, a company's main goal would be maximizing profits for investors. By contrast, stakeholder capitalism acknowledges the interests of users, communities, and regulators as well. Thus, if the user space clamors for fewer moderation restrictions, platforms may shift in that direction, provided that they can address regulatory requirements. Whether this strategy will lead to greater freedom of expression or cause a surge in disinformation and hate speech remains to be seen, especially at a time when minorities, such as the LGBTQ+ community, are often at the center of social tensions. Critics argue that scaling back moderation tools might expose vulnerable groups to more harassment, while proponents believe it safeguards freedom of expression, even for unpopular or minority viewpoints. In conclusion, for now, Europe will not see the same changes announced in the United States, mainly due to the Digital Services Act. However, we cannot exclude that if the solution ends to be successful in the United States, it will be expanded and introduced also in the European Union, provided that EU regulators are happy with this approach. We are at the end of this episode of Diritto al Digitale. We would love involving you in this podcast. Please send us an email at our contacts on the website dlapiper.com to share your experiences, questions, or suggestions. Also, if you found this episode interesting, please follow us and leave a 5-star rating on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or any other platform that you prefer. I'm Giulio Coraggio, and thank you for joining me today on Diritto al Digitale.